Hello, everybody, and welcome to the live stream. For some reason, I'm getting things all over the place. Let's try and get rid of that. Welcome to the live stream. It's great to have you here. Some of you I know probably joined the live stream that I was on yesterday with Emma. So thanks if you're doing that, getting a double dose of me. So a couple of things I'll get into, and then I'll get into the questions. There's loads of questions already. So I'm Gary Bembridge. This is Tips for Travelers. As you know, the goal of the channel, of everything we do, the live streams, is to help make it fun and easy to plan, discover, and enjoy unforgettable cruise vacations. And everything on this show is driven by the people who are here. So leave your comments and questions there. There's loads of them coming in. If you're on your desktop, they'll be there, or they'll be somewhere else if you're on your mobile or your iPad or whatever. And so if you're watching this afterwards, remember, if there's questions you don't like or aren't interested in, you can just keep flicking forwards on those, and you'll often they will come up on the screen. So keep doing that. So as I said, loads and loads of questions. So I'll get into those because they actually do touch on a couple of the big stories that are on this week anyway. So rather than do some of the stories, I thought I'd touch on those. Oh, I've got a throat in my throat. Sorry about that. Ken goes cruising. This is one of the stories of the week. Not that Ken goes cruising, but the question he's got. Hi, Gary. We've just had our Queen Mary 2 cruise in December cancelled. Apparently, they're replacing them with something closer to home. Do you have any knowledge what the itinerary will involve? I assume that's where that was going. So it's interesting. They don't seem to put them up on the site. But for those of you who don't know, Queen Mary 2 is currently having a refit at the moment, where they're replacing the spa and a few other technical bits and pieces, and then they have cancelled. They were due to come back into service towards the end of November. They've cancelled that because, of course, the US is still closed to UK and EU residents, but also anyone who's been in the UK can't go in unless you're a US resident. So they just basically can't run the transatlantics that were planned. So Ken, I do know what they're replacing them with. They're replacing them with two things. First of all, three things actually. First of all, they're replacing them with a short, one of those little 3-night kind of short cruises. And then they're replacing them with a 12-night Canary Islands cruise, which will, of course, be out of Southampton. And then they're actually going to be leaving. Normally, every year, it used to be the QE2, and then it became the Queen Mary 2. Every year leaves around the 15th, leaves on the 15th of December to do a crossing to go to New York, then heads down for 12 nights for Christmas and New Year in the Caribbean, and then does a crossing back. So they've been doing that for decades. And they're actually going to be leaving 2 days earlier than scheduled. So they're going to be leaving on the 13th of December. And everyone who's on those crossings is basically told you will do the whole lot and you'll have 2 extra days and there'll be no charge for that. And that's because they have to go through a whole series of protocols and things once they get to the US. So the idea is they'll still leave on the 22nd of December. So that's what they're replacing them with, a short kind of 3-nighter, a 12-nighter Canary Islands, and leaving for the crossing, assuming that the US is open. Of course, we don't know if the US will be open by then. The speculation is maybe sometime around about Thanksgiving, but nobody really knows. I was going to touch on another point, Lou, because I know Lou is in here, dipping out, who's about to head off to Celebrity Apex. I can't find the comment, but basically, as you've probably seen or heard, is the EU have taken the United States off their white list or green list, or whatever they call it. Now, that's not completely binding on individual countries, but it does mean that they're basically encouraging countries to reintroduce the various rules, whether that's extra testing, quarantining, whatever. So a couple of countries have moved on that, like Bulgaria, for example, which has basically stopped anyone from the US coming in. Of them, the other countries, the Netherlands has now said that if you are unvaccinated coming from the United States, you cannot travel into the Netherlands at all. If you're vaccinated, you have to go back to the 10 days quarantining. You can get an early release after testing. So I actually had some messages with some travel agents who are now madly scrabbling around with US people due to fly in to pick up river cruises, and they're now looking at trying to get them into Germany, or basically trying to get them in through the airport and straight out. I guess that's still being negotiated, so that they don't have to go through the quarantining. Now, what we don't know, of course, will Germany follow? Will Greece follow? Will Spain follow? We just don't know. The speculation is that many of those countries that rely very heavily on tourism will stick with the vaccinated US people can come in. one of the reasons, of course, the EU are doing it is they're kind of frustrated that the Biden administration didn't reciprocate. So I guess there's a bit of that going on as well. But anyway, we don't know when that's going to happen. So that actually has good news and bad news for me. I was due to do, the other thing that's happened is I was due to go on a Greek cruise on the 9th of October on Celestial Cruises. Now, Celestial Cruises have done two things. First of all, they've sold one of their ships, a ship which they had bought, which had not yet come into service. They sold that ship before it even came into service, and they have cancelled their entire winter season. So from September through to March, they won't be sailing the winter season. And I was due to go on Celestial, so that's been cancelled. My partner Mark was due to go to the US on vacation. It looks extremely unlikely the US is going to open, so he's had to cancel that and push it to next year. But on the plus side is we're now going to be looking at doing a seaborne cruise out of Greece instead in October. So because doing all these round UK trips is fine, but I'm getting a bit bored. Not bored, it's probably not true. A bit tired of only going to UK ports, not incredible weather because you haven't had great weather, and basically being surrounded by Brits all the time. So actually heading off to Greece, even despite all the testing and the protocols, is quite exciting overall. So let's do the JM129, who normally asks challenging questions, but this one is not, anyway, not as challenging, I don't think, but for me anyway. JM129, good to see you again. Know you exercise, but with all the cruises and array of food offered, you remain very trim, which is an unusual feat. What's the secret to you staying close to the same weight? It can't solely be tea. For those of you who know, my key weakness is afternoon tea. So I love going on afternoon tea. So the JM129, in reality, it's a couple of things, one of which is Peloton. I am completely addicted to doing Peloton classes. So I do this at home before I go on the cruise. I do those when I'm on the cruise. So even though many cruises don't have Peloton bikes, so Celebrity, for example, have Peloton bikes, most don't, but you can download those, and I do them on normal bikes. So I do Peloton. I do Peloton 2 days on, 1 day off, 2 days on, 1 day off, and I have done that since the beginning of lockdown. So I think I'm about consecutive 78 weeks or something, and that is the real thing. Secondly, on a ship, I do lots of walking, simply walking around, videoing. I do thousands and thousands of steps every day. I try not to use the elevators, but also one of the things I do, because I realize this, because I go on cruises quite often, I probably have less drive, whatever the word is, to really just do everything. So I tend to not have desserts unless it's chocolate something. So I tend to not have desserts. I go to specialty dining, particularly if I want to video it for the channel, but I don't do a lot of specialty dining. And the other key thing is I don't drink alcohol. So when I'm on a cruise, I don't end up, having those cocktails and all that kind of stuff. So that's probably the secret. But Peloton is probably the main secret. Certainly since I did Peloton and been doing Peloton, I've found it much easier to keep weight under control. So you're right. I've been on 6 cruises since the resumption, and I am at the moment, as of today, about 1.5 pounds heavier than I was at the end when I started cruising, and that I'll lose in the next 2 days or so before I go cruising again. So augmented future, looking forward to hearing about international cruises and what your expectations are, Gary. I see that MSC are doing Europe to UAE cruises on the Opera and Virtuosa in October. So international cruising is a very interesting one, and it's happening with different pockets around the world based on restrictions. But you're right, certainly MSC is probably being one of the more ambitious in terms of doing those cruises, and they're looking at doing the UAE leg. In practice, not many are being particularly ambitious, certainly with international cruising this year. So what we're seeing a lot of the UK lines doing is they are now looking to try and build in the Caribbean, because they reposition ships. So things like P&O reposition their ships into the Caribbean. They will be based out of places like Barbados. They charter people in on charter flights into Barbados, so they can also control it a little bit, and things like quarantine or whatever that may be, sailing around the Caribbean with all where those individual protocols are on the islands, whether it's cruise island excursions and so on. But most of the cruise lines are really still sticking this year very much to those parts of the Mediterranean that are sailing, the Caribbean. So we're seeing relatively limited opening. So as we saw there, the Queen Elizabeth is still doing its sort of some of the Canary Islands and stuff for Christmas. It's not really into next year that most of the cruise lines are looking at going a little bit more further afield. So a couple of people ask me, like, what do we think is going to happen with the Asia cruises at the beginning of January? We don't really know yet. And a lot of that will hinge around some of the vaccination things and things that we've made the points there. So international cruising is pretty limited in reality. It's really a bit of repositioning. And the thing that's going to be very interesting with repositioning this year is many of those ships are sailing or are likely to be sailing to the US empty. So Virgin Scarlet Lady left yesterday or the day before to reposition to the US. They're actually going to New York first, and it's sailing with no passengers because no UK people can go into the US. So a lot of the ships are now talking about when they reposition to the Caribbean having to sail empty. So that's going to be kind of interesting. So not a lot happening on international cruising, and a lot of people are looking much more at next year. Hetty, good to see you again. Hetty, probably missing the very first. Someone said thank you very much. This is the 40th live stream that I've done since we started, and I think Hetty's probably been to all of those. So so great. Ginger, am I late or early? We're 10 minutes in, so you're definitely perfectly etc. on time, not late or early. Martin's asking a great question around Alaska. Thoughts on including a Denali excursion on Alaska cruise planning in 2023 mid-June on Holland America? Martin, if you've got the time, I absolutely would build on the extension. The Alaska cruise part is fantastic, but a lot of people, certainly Alaskans and other people, say, you're only seeing a very specific slice of Alaska on the cruise, and a very beautiful slice of Alaska, but actually getting out into the lodges and getting out into more the wilderness, I guess, is definitely something to do. So definitely, if you've got the time, I would definitely strongly recommend it. And as you say, Holland America is a fantastic line to do that with. They have their own lodge. Princess, I think, have 3 lodges, if I remember correctly. And Princess also have the trains and all that stuff, and because they're sister ships, they try to get. So I definitely do that. Absolutely, definitely do that. It really is worth doing. I mean, it's otherwise you're only seeing a really part of Alaska, and so. But a couple of other people jumping in, strongly recommending the Denali. Lots of people saying. So Bob has been on Seabourn Ovation for 2 weeks now. I've been following his trip with interest, obviously, because I follow him anyway, but also because Seabourn Ovation is the one that Mark and I are planning to do. So he's been on for 2 weeks. Good to see you on. Hope your rest of your trip was great. And of course, one of the things that Bob is looking at is that thing we were talking about earlier, which is what's going to happen with Europe, not with Europe and US, because he's due to head back on a couple of rural cruises and I think another ocean cruise, if I remember correctly. So good to see you. So safe, very safe travels back. So let me just see that I saw there's a couple of super chats and bits and pieces. So let's have a look. Michael, thank you very much for that. My husband is going on a California coastal with Holland America. What is open right after you board? What do you actually have to check in for your stateroom? So what is open right after you board, and what do you actually have to check in for your stateroom? So Michael, a couple of things. I mean, in terms of what's open on board, everything that's allowed to be open within the regulations will be open. So you'll find very few things are actually closed, but you'll find like the casino has to be closed. You'll find the shops have to be closed because that's all linked into kind of the duty free, etc. But you'll find once he gets on board, you'll find that most things will be open. Obviously, what they tend to do, certainly when you get on board, is not necessarily all the dining venues won't be open as such. They normally will have, say, the buffet will be open and the main dining room will be open. Not all the Pinnacle Grill and the specialities won't be open, but there'll certainly be plenty of places to eat. The places around the pool will be there to eat. The spa, if you want to go and do some fitness, you want to go and swim, or whatever, you can do all that. But you can't do, say, a spa treatment. But basically, all the things you would expect to do until you set sail are open. So there's plenty to do. You can eat, you can swim, you can all do that stuff. So in terms of checking in for your stateroom, I mean, the only thing you have to do, and I hope I'm answering this question correctly, but so leave another comment if I'm not. But literally all you have to do normally is when you get, check in for your cruise, you normally be given your cruise card, which on Holland America, you get given your cruise card when you check in. And then depending on the time that you're boarding, normally with Holland America, the way they normally do the process is you can then go straight to your stateroom. But it depends a little bit on the boarding. Sometimes you might find you board and you have to wait till they do an announcement for staterooms to be open. But I think in my experience in Holland America, they normally schedule the boarding to happen that you can go straight to your stateroom, which is particularly now where they're also getting people really, really quickly because of some of the deep cleaning they have to do. They actually have more time to get the cabins ready, whereas before when they're staggered, disembarking a little bit longer, you didn't always have your cabin available. But that's literally all you have to do. And the other thing I would say that with checking in for your stateroom, one of the things I always recommend is when you do come on board and you can go to your stateroom, obviously you can go dump your rucksack or whatever. But also, a lot of people dash in, look at the staterooms, great, head off. It's a good idea to also just check everything in your stateroom, just make sure you're happy with everything there. You've got the stuff you want, the lights are working, the minibar's got whatever you want, the right pillow, whatever, because your cabin steward will probably come along as soon as they can to introduce themselves, and it's handy to know if there's any things that you want tweaked or sorted out. So hopefully that's answered. If not, leave another comment. Michael saying Koningsdam is Koningsdam is a very, very nice ship, actually, Michael. It's a really, really nice ship. So I actually have a video tour of Koningsdam. So if you want to watch one of my videos, I do have a tour of Koningsdam. It's a really nice ship. It's one of their new classes, which I think are called Pinnacle class of ships. So you've got things like New Stateroom, Koningsdam, Rotterdam. Really, really nice ships. I really like what they've done with those ships. So I'm actually on the New Stateroom twice next year, actually, going to the Baltics and doing in January, hopefully, doing a Caribbean trip. So let's go back, as I see lots of people joining. I've kind of probably jumped ahead. Beth saying thanks for my 40th. I think I've already mentioned that there. Lots of people wishing Lou a great, safe trip. It's very interesting. I've been watching Lou's heading off to Apex. And Morgan from Very Unofficial Travel Guides has been on Apex this past week, and it's been great seeing some of the stuff he's posted. Really, really nice weather. It's great also seeing Apex. I was supposed to be on Apex last year, didn't happen, of course. So it's been also great seeing that. So now Heather's had a rough week, and I'm trying to pick it up. It sounds like let's have a look up. I think I saw something about your ankle or something. I'll come on to that in a second. Jim, got back from my Saga Spirit Adventure on Thursday. Great cruise, but despite all the precautions, I had a positive COVID test on my return. Very sorry to hear that, Jim. So not sure how long after the cruise you got on. So Spirit Adventure, for those who don't know, Saga Cruises has two new ships. They have Spirit of Discovery, which I've been on, Spirit Adventure, which is new, which I haven't actually seen or toured. I was invited to the naming ceremony of that, but I couldn't go to that, unfortunately. So I haven't seen that ship, but it's really similar. So they did have, certainly when I was on Spirit Discovery, pretty strict protocols and stuff. So sorry to hear that. Hopefully that you're feeling okay. And of course, I don't know how quickly after the cruise you did that, but I guess that's the point. As we saw again, I think I was talking last week with those who were here, is one of the challenges still particularly with the Delta variant, is we can still get get COVID, and the good news hopefully is that you feel rough rather than end up seriously ill and in hospital, etc. So there are still cases popping up on different cruises. So despite the testing and whatever, so for example on Celebrity Syndicate we had two cases, and then they had actually on the cruise last week they actually had a couple of other cases amongst the guest band and guest performing group and some of the production team. So these things can still pop up, and I guess one of the things, although there's the vaccination, there's the distancing, there's the mask wearing, etc., I guess we are able to get off important self-explore. So there's always that, I guess, that risk that there is a chance coming back. So hopefully you stay well, Jim. So Bob's asking, do you think the Netherlands and Bulgaria decision to follow EU guidance will last long? It's hard to say, Bob. And I guess the question is how many other countries will follow. I suspect, personally, I have no data for this, but I suspect if you also look at the sort of things that the EU was saying, there's real frustration over the US not reciprocating what happened during the summer to allow vaccinated people in the EU, particularly now the EU, which obviously was lagging on vaccinations, is I think quite a bit ahead of the US now. And so I think there's a real frustration. So I think, if I remember correctly, the Netherlands guidance is for about 2 months or so. So I think it's going to see where it all hits. And I think the bigger issue is what other countries follow and what impacts does that have. So I suspect opening of the US may free things up, but I don't know. Lucy's mum, Mr. Bembridge, that's very formal. I hope your mother enjoyed the afternoon tea and your photo on Twitter. How do you get invitations to shakedown cruises? Are they for well-known cruise critics only? June of Lucy. So yes, she did enjoy my tea. For those of you who don't know, like maybe following me on Twitter or on Instagram, is as you probably know if you follow me certainly on anything else, I'm a huge big fan of afternoon tea. Do it a lot on cruises if they have it. But also then what I do is I rope my mother in when I'm on land and I take her off on afternoon tea, which of course she's more than willing to do. So she did enjoy it enormously. And so in terms of shakedown cruises, so in terms of getting invitations to shakedown cruises, just to explain what happens a lot with shakedown, there's kind of 2 times shakedown cruises happen. The most common time is when the ship comes out of shipyards. And since all cruise ships, I think I'm right in saying that, pretty much all cruise ships are built in Europe, in European dockyards. The great thing about being based in Europe is when the ships first come out of the shipyard, they're in Europe. So they tend to invite a lot of people from Europe onto shakedown cruises to basically trial things out. So they often will have a smaller shakedown cruise, sometimes just with the employees, perhaps some friends and family. Then they will invite, mostly to your point, Lucy's mum, it's actually not cruise. It's not so much journalists and stuff. They invite a lot of trade people on. So when I've been on shakedown cruises, it's been mostly trade. So they invite lots and lots of travel agents, because obviously they're trying to get travel agents to sell the new ship, the line, and sell the new ship. So they tend to invite all of the major travel agent groups and some of the independent travel agents. So in fact, like Sarah, for example, who is my travel agent, she often gets invited onto shakedown cruises through travel councils, which she's part of. They then also tend to invite a lot of journalists, particularly well-known cruise journalists. So, whether it's from the newspapers or the magazines. So I will often see the same people. And often, there's people from Germany, from the United States as well. They invite people from Cruise Critic, the site Cruise Critic. And then they do tend to invite sort of cruise bloggers and vloggers. So that's almost the hierarchy, if you like. So I've been on some where there's maybe been 10 or 12 cruise bloggers, mostly from the UK, because obviously they're not going to pay to fly cruise bloggers over from the US, but they might fly people from the UK to pick up the ship in Venice or wherever the ship happens to be. They often bring the ship often to the UK actually to do the checkout cruises from there, because it's easy to get people in and stuff. So in terms of other people like passengers and stuff, they don't invite those on shakedown cruises. So if you were looking as a passenger, a normal traveler, they don't invite them on because they don't really want passengers on until they've done the run where the things don't work. Are you waiting hours for something to work, or the technology doesn't work? So that's the way to get invited. Is you need to be a travel agent, for personally on cruise, a journalist who writes a lot about cruise, big sites like Cruise Critic, and then a travel blogger or vlogger who normally has a relationship with the line. So if the line knows you, so if it's Norwegian, they know about you, they will invite or like you. But they don't invite. The only other way you can get on is kind of as a friends and family. So Francis also talking about the Kumara 2 cancelled over for the January Jazz Cruise and Celebrity. That should go hopefully by January. That should be the case. Particularly, I'm assuming that's probably out of the US. Lou watched the show with Emma. As I mentioned, I was on with Emma yesterday. So let's have a look. Jim saying something about my chat message. I probably missed the first part of that, Jim. My web chat message remains unread for 6 hours, and prior to the cruise, their customer care line had recorded an answer that was closed, and thank you for your patience. So Jim, I probably missed that. I'll see if I can go back and find that in a second. I'm guessing I can't see it there. I'll try and see if I can find that and come back to that. So let's have a look. Queen of Cunard, what are your thoughts on the Sun cruises, please? I'm guessing Queen of Cunard, very grand title. Queen of Cunard. What are your thoughts on the Sun cruises? I'm guessing Queen of Cunard, you're talking about the Canary Islands replacement cruise. I think that's what you're probably talking about. I mean, I haven't done that cruise. I'm not a massive fan of the Canary Islands. However, what I would say is the Canary Islands, those sun cruises, chasing the sun cruises at that time of the year and Christmas is a staple of Cunard, and you may well know that. So every Christmas, you'll normally find the Queen Elizabeth or Queen Victoria, one of them is doing that Canary Islands cruise as kind of a no-fly cruise out of the UK, and they are really, really popular. They sell out really, really well. So I suspect Cunard have pretty much understood that region. They've understood the ports, they've understood the things to do, and they will know how to do it. So, if I would be, at the moment, theoretically in November, I'm going to Antarctica. I'll talk about Antarctica in a second. Actually, there's news on that, but it is definitely one that I would probably have considered because it's a no-fly cruise. It's out of the UK. It's going to effectively one territory. And I haven't seen, they haven't announced all the stops on the way, but it's probably only going to go in 1 to 2 countries. So it's going to be relatively, all the problems with testing and red country, green countries and all that stuff. You don't have that hassle. So I would look at being Cunard, not having been on Cunard. So, and they do them, and they are pretty popular. So let's have a look. Lots of people that I don't recognize before, like from Boston, from Texas, UTX Lab Rat, great name. Jim was just following up on the testing positive come back from Spirit of Adventure. So just confirming, on Saga you had to be. What was interesting also with Saga is they created a bubble, because with Saga they include transfers from your home, so you get picked up just as one household, and then you have to be vaccinated. Then they encourage you to do your own lateral flow test at home, which is free. Kind of in the UK, they do the testing before you board, and then they were pretty good at the distancing. They were also, although they didn't have any contact tracing, they were kind of doing a manual contact tracing. So yeah, I haven't heard, Jim, anything else. So I'll definitely get some. See if I've seen. I haven't picked up at anything of that. Heather, I think I've seen that you had some. I haven't quite seen what happened to you, but hopefully you're better. It's like people in the wars today. So I keep hearing stories of people in the US having a terrible time getting COVID tests before their cruises, and now the cruise lines have shortened the window to 48 hours. Thoughts? Heather, yes, this seems to be a really big challenge. Is again, for those of you who don't know, what happened in the US, which was slightly different too in Europe and the UK, but when all the travel advice changed for vaccinated travelers and cruises started, is you had to have proof of vaccine, and originally you didn't necessarily have to have COVID testing. Then as the Delta variant grew, various cases on board, etc., the cruise lines then, many of them that didn't have the PCR testing, introduced PCR testing, which for most cruises, like in Europe, for those that have PCR testings, or if you're traveling internationally, was the 3-day rule. Then they've just changed it to a 2-day rule, so you have to have had it within 2 days. Now, already I'd seen lots of people reporting about how even it was quite difficult to get COVID tests, and I guess also with the surge in Delta variant, more people being worried or whatever, people are booking more and more tests, I guess, which is happening everywhere. And I've seen lots of people were struggling with the 3 days, and then that reduction to the 2 days has become a really big challenge. Now, what some of the cruise lines are doing, I've seen, for example, Carnival are doing, is they're now looking to try and put in place in some of the ports like Miami, some testing facilities there where people can do testing if they haven't been able to do it, or because of their travel schedule, they're flying cross country and the way it all works, they can't actually do a COVID test and get the result with all the transfers, etc. What I noticed with that testing, though, is they're putting it in. They're arguing very clearly in the communication that it's a backup. testing, and also that passengers have to pay for it. One of the things that's very interesting, looking at it from this side of the Atlantic, is within most of the cruises, not all of the cruises, but many of the cruises in Europe and certainly the cruises in the UK, the testing is built into the fare. So, for example, on the Celebrity cruise, the PCR test, they required a PCR test, was built into the fare. On the other ones, they do testing at the port, which is the faster antigen test, that's built into the fare. But what I've seen very much in the US is that is an additional cost. So what they've said with these backup facilities, it's again at the passenger cost. So I think it's definitely a real bottleneck, because I know even in the UK, sort of when testing started, there was a real pressure on labs being able to turn the results around quickly enough. So even if you could get a slot, things were falling later and later and later. So it's going to be hard. It's going to be a challenging time, and definitely, I guess the cruise lines hopefully will put in more and more capacity, because it's also in their interest to. And certainly we're seeing some of those doing it. So definitely something to watch how it develops over that at that time. And one of the things, for example, someone asked me yesterday is, for example, with the Seabourn Ovation trip, now to go into Greece, I have to have a PCR test within 72 hours. But then also I have to have a COVID test within 72 hours. So it's still the 3 days at the moment before I get on Seabourn Ovation. So we were originally thinking of spending some days in Athens before getting on the ship, but actually saying that doesn't kind of make sense, because we start hitting PCR problems and having to do the tests within Greece, and we don't know how easy that will be, and so on and so forth, etc. So actually changing that so that we don't get there that much before. But you're right, if they reduce that to 2 days, it would mean that we would have to get the test in Greece in order to be able to do it, or fly in on the day, which with the time difference and flights is quite a challenge. So it's definitely going to be something. Gary Pluck of Red Travel, good to see you, Gary. Gary is the travel agent that I have directed a lot of people to when they're looking for someone in the US. Queen Mary 2, I was surprised to see the Queen Mary 2 is heading back across the pond in December, plus with 2 overnight stays in New York. This will be a COVID challenge, especially with the stop in New York. It's very interesting. I mean, I guess what Cunard are desperately, I was kind of surprised that they're being bullish, but I can sort of see why at this stage they're still doing that, because for them, that Caribbean trip that leaves on the 22nd of December is such an institution for Cunard. It is always sold out. We've done it twice now, maybe 3 times, and it's quite an experience. But and that is always sold out and at a premium. So if you look at the price per night, that is always a big premium. That must be a very good and profitable cruise, I guess, for them. So I guess they're trying to do everything to protect that. So I guess they're being bullish. I was also really interested in this 2 overnight stays in New York. It sounds to me, again, not having any data, but it sounds to me that they've had some kind of discussion with the CDC or whatever, because we haven't heard any other cruise line in repositioning talking about adding in extra days. And they very specifically in their announcement spoke about going through these special procedures. And it was interesting because the people who are going to be on that crossing are going to stay within the ship and go on excursions. But it also sounded like they were going to have to go on bubble excursions. Now, that's how it read. And we haven't seen it because the cruises aren't actually up on the website. Certainly they weren't when I looked this afternoon. So, but in the release that I did read, it suggested that you had to go on bubble excursions. So it sounds like there's some kind of process being put in place. And you're right with the way the whole Delta, whatever variant it is. But there's lots of question marks still without it. Is the US going to be open fully, and what those processes are? But certainly, I guess for them, that is really important, getting the transatlantic backs. Ryan and Sophie, good to see you here. Ryan and Sophie are, for those of you who are interested, Ryan and Sophie are a couple that they own a yacht, and they sail kind of all around the world. During the whole COVID, they were in the Bonaire, I think if I remember correctly, basically through COVID, they were there. They actually then, as COVID eased, and because of the hurricane season coming in, they then did they sailed across the Atlantic with lots of adventures and using satellite stuff into, I think it was Madeira, I think the boat is now, and they are both gone home. Sophie has gone back to France. Ryan's gone back to Missouri, if I remember correctly, and then they're joining the ship again, joining the boat again, the yacht again, should I say, in a couple of weeks, and then sailing to the Canary Islands, and then eventually they will sail back. Really interesting channel, really entertaining channel. It's fascinating, kind of, for those people who are into cruising and sailing. It's really interesting watching the whole different world, and it's very entertaining. One of the things I would encourage you to watch, if you do watch their channel, is take a look at when they crossed the Atlantic the first time. You know, if you've ever done a transatlantic crossing on Queen Mary 2, or you've done a repositioning cruise and all the comfort and luxury, it's just watching the experience they go through and just how exhausting it is. But you know, they're right down there in this little yacht with all the waves around. It's really, really quite scary and entertaining, but I would strongly recommend. So it's great to see them joining. So that's fantastic. So definitely take a look at their channel. I would really, really recommend that. Pat J 61, perhaps a teacher or something there. Thank you. I noticed the price of a cruise we booked on went down. I called, like you said, and got a bunch of onboard credit. Fantastic. As people know, a couple of my obsessions that I have obsession around afternoon tea. I have an obsession about noise in cabins and cabins surrounded by on all sides, no interconnecting door. And I'm also obsessed with tracking of cruise fares. And I use things like Cruise Watch, although a couple of people pointed out, if you're a UK-based cruiser, you probably doesn't work as well for you if you're on things like P&O. So use things like Cruise Critic. They do a similar thing. And one of the things I always say is, if the fare goes down, contact your through your travel agent or the line. Say you've seen it's gone down, ask them to give you a new fare. If they don't give you a new fare, onboard credit. So it's fantastic. It's great that that's worked for you. And you know, it's very much up to you to do that call. So some of the lines will say they'll have like a price match, but you have to contact them. Saga, interestingly, referring back to Saga, is the only one of the few lines. There's another line that I read the other day, but I can't remember which one it was. But Saga have said is, if they reduce the fares, they will reduce your fare without you having to call them. But really important, so Pat, really good. Cruise Watch definitely one to watch. So Lou's saying that he's been struggling to get a test. Hopefully you do get that sorted. So Jim, just the ongoing saga of Spirit of Discovery, Spirit of Adventure, sorry. We went to Dead Sea, so Tilbury, Scrabster, Shetlands, Invergordon, Dead Sea. We had a code Quebec, all passenger cabins for an hour, one suspected case on board. Okay, so that's good to know. So code Quebec, that's interesting. I hadn't heard, because on cruise lines, I think I did a video about it once. I should do maybe update it. Is one of the things that's worth learning is a couple of the code words, because the certain, if they ever come across and talk about a code something, then you know what it is. Something's rather gruesomely mean a death on board. Something's mean a certain accident on board. And so code Quebec, I'm guessing, maybe sounds like it's, I need to look that one up, but maybe that is something related to COVID. That'll be interesting, because I haven't seen code Quebec before. Hadrian, hi Gary, great channel. Thank you very much. Could you recommend sites that go into detail on special diets on cruises, please? We had issues on the recent Celebrity Silhouette, as my wife is a celiac, and is gluten-free. Hadrian, yes, I do. The best site of all in that I've come across is Sana, and her site is called Vegan Cruiser. It's a blog, so she doesn't have a YouTube channel, but Sana is a phenomenal resource. Obviously with a heavy bias towards vegan, as it would suggest, but she has done and is building line by line, in fact even ship by ship, you know, details around menus, which lines are better, which lines are worse, and also importantly how you go around you know, addressing those issues, who you talk to, that kind of stuff. So the vegan cruiser, I think it's vegancruiser.co.uk. I think it might be vegancruiser.com. If you look her up on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, for example, or Instagram, if you look at Vegan Cruiser, she's actually on MSC Virtuoso. And a little bit to your point about Celebrity Silhouette is, you know, as a vegan, she has had quite a difficult and challenging time on MSC, which did surprise a little bit, being the size of the ship and the numbers, etc. And one of the things that struck me was, unlike some of the other cruises she's been on, everything on her Instagram page is beige and brown. So definitely she's a really great resource. And also Adrian, she's also always very, very interested in what people are looking for, and she's very responsive. So for example, I was on when I was on Virgin, she has other people who sort of research and write for her blog as well. And because I was on Virgin, she'd done some work on Virgin, and I was sending them menus and stuff. So she was then collating and checking and stuff. So that is the best I know. If anybody else has any other sites they've come across that are like that, particularly maybe focused on being celiac, gluten free. And I'm sorry to hear that you had that problem, because most cruise lines have become pretty good at it. And in my experience is, particularly I've seen, particularly if you're talking to the maitre d' very early on, I've seen, normally they will come with the menu for the next day, talk through the menu, and really sort that out. So that's disappointing to hear that wasn't the case. Sort of linked to that, Patrick Philip, do you have to pre-order while booking special food such as kosher or halal, or can you just do it when you get on the ship? That's a really good question, Patrick. Because very specifically on kosher and halal, I off the top of my head, I don't know the answer 100% to that. In fact, Gary may know the answer. Perhaps Gary knows the answer to that. But certainly, what I would say is, once you're on board, absolutely, even if you have discussed it with the line before, I would absolutely go and see the maitre d' really at the beginning. Now, particularly for kosher and halal, because on most of the menus, I haven't often seen kosher symbols and halal symbols on many of the menus, but that doesn't necessarily mean that's not the case. So I would always, anyway, when there's anything like that, even if it's if it's physical needs as well as dietary, very specific needs like that, I would always check with the travel agent and check with the line. Do I need to do anything? Because it may differ by line, particularly if you go on some of the small lines. If anyone knows anything much more specific to that, but I'll also try and find that. So I'll also try and find out myself. Roblox dude, where can I get that Queen Mary 2 model? I get asked a lot. I should probably not put that. I also want to QE2, and so I change them around as the backdrop. Unfortunately, at the moment, I got these quite a long time ago. I got them on a guy who used to sell them on eBay, which he stopped selling them, and I learned through someone else that the guy who made them, I think, had passed away or something. So I haven't been able to find similar ones to these, because I have been looking, because a lot of people ask me around those. So there are some models that you can buy, but then they're not as good as the ones that I've seen. So I am constantly looking out for them, and if I ever do, I'll announce. But at the moment, I haven't been able to find anything at all like that. So Heather, obviously more on Heather's some issues with her daughter's face, tripped and fell. So hopefully, that's all been sorted. Viking Base. Hi, Gary. Do you know of any theme cruises coming up? Have you ever been on one? Do you recommend them? Thanks, from Vegas. Oh, I love Vegas. Vegas, I'm really missing going to Vegas. So I mean, I love cruising, but I absolutely love Vegas. And people think we're a little bit crazy because, most people, I guess, if you live in Vegas, you know this. I mean, most people go to Vegas and they go for like 2 nights or 3 nights. And Mark and I will go for a week or longer and just love Vegas. But anyway, so, which is a bit of an aside, and not being able to get to Vegas for ages. Next time I'm going to Vegas is in May next year. We're doing a crossing on Queen Mary 2, which has been cancelled trillions of times. Get to New York, fly that day to Vegas, and spending a week in Vegas. Anyway, so do I know any theme cruises coming up? I haven't seen a lot of stuff on theme cruises, and what's kind of disappointing, there was a fantastic site which was called Theme Cruise Finder, which stopped operating. I think it was someone's passion hobby, and that was my go-to place for themed cruises, because they would list them there by full theme cruises, part theme cruises. So I don't know of many coming up. So what you end up having to do, Viking Base, is I've found, until I find a better solution, is literally if you have a passion. So if you're interested in football, or you're interested in knitting or crocheting, Game of Thrones, Star Trek, any of those things, 2 things to do. One of which is follow any of the big fan clubs for those, or literally, unfortunately, you literally just have to Google motorcycle themed cruise and hope the hell it comes up, or Game of Thrones themed cruise. There are certain ones like, Star Trek is one that happens every single year. There's some big motorcycle ones. So I don't know what your specific passions are, but unfortunately, there's not one big resource. And I've desperately been looking for one, because it used to be a fantastic resource, and also just it was quite entertaining just go and look at the range of those. So what I've seen is, I guess, a lot of the theme cruises have been postponed or cancelled because of the pandemic. One of the things that I need to look at again is there is, you may or may not be interested in this, there are quite popular swinger and nudist cruises that were due to happen this year, and I don't know if they're still on. Now, the reason I know a lot about swinger cruises is not because I've been on a swinger cruise, but I have a tour of a ship, which they don't use so much, but it was MSC Divina. And every couple of months, I would get this enormous surge in people watching MSC Divina ship tour over the last couple of years. And I eventually managed to go back and look through all the stats and data, and discovered it was because the swinger cruises were run on MSC Divina. And so every time they launched one, I think they actually linked to my video on there, and there was a huge uplift. So there's those, and I know they were certainly due to have some this year, and I don't know if they still are. So here we go. Steve, wifey and I are on board Celebrity Apex right now in Greece, thanks to you recognition of Gary Pug as an agent too. Oh, that's brilliant to know. So that's good to know. So are you doing, I don't know, Steve, if you're doing a back-to-back, because I know Morgan got off today, because I saw him posting pictures of a very busy airport. So I guess he just did the week. I don't know if you're doing back-to-back, but certainly it looks like an amazing cruise, amazing weather. And I think it looked like the ship wasn't that full. So so hopefully having a really great time. And Lou's on next week, so then if you still be on it, but certainly it looks like a pretty amazing cruise. Right, so, and it was behind Seabourn Ovation. I guess Seabourn Ovation must really look pretty tiny next to Celebrity Apex. Here we go. I heard from Michelle that there are only 490 guests, passengers on Apex, and I think there was only 250 odd, if I remember correctly, what Bob was saying. One of the things that has been very interesting, just picking up on this point here about how many people are on board, and I've noticed a couple of things. I've noticed everybody that I've spoken to who've either been on cruises or just come off cruises, or even when I was on cruises, there appears to be a real slowdown in the amount of people on cruises. So I've seen, for example, on Twitter, a couple of crew that I follow posting things like, where is everybody? Some of the Royal Caribbean ships have, only 400 people, some of them on the Caribbean sailings, 450 people. I was on Celebrity Silhouette, and when I was on, I think we had 1,200 people, something like that. The cruise after me, it went down to 800, and the cruise that's just setting sail today, what did we today? Setting sail yesterday, again, only had 450 people on. So there's definitely been a real slowdown. I don't know whether that's because, school holidays have ended, summer's kind of ended, people are heading back to work, or whether this whole, with the stricter restrictions with, the Delta variants, whether it's getting tougher on travel, difficulty getting COVID tests, uncertainty. But there does seem to be a real kind of slowing down of people cruising. So it's going to be really interesting. And I think also, I would say I've seen on my channel is very interesting, because if, the way that YouTube works is obviously there's people like yourselves who might come on regularly and watch stuff and seek out whether it's my channel or Emma's channel or Cruise Show UK or whatever, and actively watch it. But YouTube also push a lot of content out. So a lot of the views come from when they suggest it to people. And I think, and during the whole pandemic, I could tell when sentiment was changing towards travel and changed toward cruising, because I could see, because what YouTube do is they also show you a chart which shows you people who've watched your channel before, and I think it's watched in the last 6 months or 9 months or something once, and people who've never watched your channel before, certainly haven't watched in the last year. And watching that graph is very interesting, because they only introduced it partly during the pandemic, but you can almost see when sentiment for travel is kind of increasing, because I see the people who have watched the channel before grow. And obviously it depends on videos and stuff, but I get a real sense that there's kind of people are becoming much more cautious, and maybe that's just me. So interesting to know. So very interesting to know, to Lou, how many people you had on board. And I think Bob because Bob had sent me a couple of messages when I was trying to sell Ovation to Mark with how many people on board. I think it was 200 and something. So interesting. So here we go. Augmented future again. Any opinions on the CDC faffing around while the rest of the world are cruising? So in reality, the CDC, it's very interesting actually, augmented future, because the CDC, you're right, the CDC in some ways they changed a little bit, I guess, and in some ways they are a little bit more liberal than some of the health rules in other places. So although I guess from the US perspective, there's a lot of frustration around the chopping and changing and whatever, but actually, if you look at, say, the rules in the US for cruising, where you could do, what was it, 95% vaccinated. At one point, there wasn't mask rules and there wasn't the testing. You didn't have to test and that sort of stuff. You know, in the UK, I think as someone mentioned earlier, the regulations were, it was only vaccinated passengers, or if it was under 18s, they had to go through PCR tests. People had to be tested before you got on board. You had to wear a mask on board. There had to be social distancing. There had to be reduced capacity. Certain things you weren't even allowed to dance, for example. Dancing wasn't allowed for quite a long period of time. Things like karaoke, singing wasn't allowed for a long period of time. So in reality, it's kind of, the way that they're handling is kind of different, because in reality, what I think, certainly again looking at it across the pond, is the CDC seem to have the final say on what happens in cruising. And I guess the difference in other regions is the equivalent of the CDC has an influence, but doesn't have the final say. The government, the politicians have the final say, which is why I think we've probably seen things moving much quicker and perhaps more trials. But again, if you look at Australia, they've been told you're not going to cruise until at least the 17th of December, and the government won't even talk to the cruise industry, which was another piece of news this thing. So I think it's the thing I've always said is, I think it's when, and we're seeing an argument here in the UK, for example, where if you rely entirely on the scientists and the health to make the decisions, you're going to end up in one place. So for example, I know in the US, you've got vaccinations, I think, for over 12s already in place, and in parts of Europe, you've got that. But in the UK, there's an independent group called the Joint Committee on Vaccinations or whatever, and they set the advice, and it's scientific and whatever, and they're saying, well, we're not sure about 12 to 15-year-olds, and maybe not, and so the problem is that they take a very purist, I guess, very strict view. The politicians and the government make the decisions on those, and I think that's the difference, equivalent. I don't know if I explained that very well. Hopefully I've explained that well. I'm also trying not to get into too much into politics. Brian and Sophie, I'll be totally addicted to Peloton. I suspect you probably would. It'd be interesting to see a Peloton on board your yacht. First of all, take up too much space, and I guess you'd have to have really good Wi-Fi indeed. Right, so saying that sound around about 25% capacity. So let's Steve-O, hi. Really useful, been watching for months. Fantastic, good to hear. On MSC Virtuosa, Southampton, Barcelona on the 14th of September. Booked a tour from El Ferro and wondered if I need to complete Spanish arrivals form for there and Barcelona. So Steve, I don't actually know the answer to this. So I'm not going to actually answer that because I don't really know exactly what the situation will be and the entry into Barcelona and how that chops and changes with their rules. So unfortunately, Steve, I can't answer that question. But if I do find out, I'll know, or if somebody else knows the answer to that. So sorry about that. Andy and Kirsty, we were supposed to be on Queen to December as well. Second cruise, was cancelled. Yes, because we were supposed to be on that cruise that got cancelled. Any suggestions for the second or third week in December to replace it? Interesting one. So, of course, I guess one of the challenges that we all have is, does one go further afield or not further afield? And the challenge, I guess, Annie and Kirsty, is most of the ships will have moved. But have you thought about the Queen Elizabeth? Because the Queen Elizabeth is doing cruises second, third week in December, which I think is similar to the Canary Island ones. And of course, Queen Mary 2 are doing at the beginning of December, but it's probably too early for you, that same Canary Islands cruise. But you're right, most of the ships in Europe will have shifted, except for a couple in the Med. So that's my best suggestion: is look at the Queen Elizabeth. If anyone else has got anything else, indeed. So yeah, good point. The travel to and from Germany was super stressful. I think that's the point that in Greece, the challenge we have with all these things is every country has different rules. So we have countries getting out of the we have rules getting out of the country, we have rules getting in the country. But Germany has some rules getting out, but Greece has some very specific rules, which I'm sure Lou's been exploring, where you have to have uploaded certain things into their app. You have to generate a specific QR code, and follow very specific regulations, which of course kind of chop and change, etc. Crystal is asking the question: what advice would you give someone who is really plus sized and cruising for the first time? Crystal, I don't know if there are any real specific separate things that I would do, other than some of the real key fundamentals. If you're cruising for the first time, the most important thing of all that I say to people is make sure that you get on the absolute right cruise line for you. So that's probably the most important thing. And one of the ways I would do that, particularly if you're doing for the first time, Crystal, is I would also encourage you to talk to a travel agent, because you can then talk about what are the things that are concerning you. So if you're plus size, what are the things that worry you about? Are there things around the accommodation, the cabins, the dining options, the tour, whatever it is that you have issues with, because they can also then probably help steer you towards the right solution, for you. But I think that would be the most critical thing, is getting on the absolute right cruise that suits you in terms of the kind of thing you want to do. So if you're not into dressing up, for example, then you would steer away from your Cunards or your more dress things. If you want a very classic thing, you might think more about your Holland Americas. If you want a party thing, you might go more Carnival. So that becomes really, really important. I would say that is the most important thing, finding a cruise line that you're really going to be really comfortable with. But then what I would do is then, if there are things that you're specifically concerned about, like kind of literally jot those down. Find a good travel agent. If you're in the US, you've got Gary. If you're in the UK, you've got someone like Sarah. And say, look, these are things that I'm concerned about. These things that I'm worried about. This, what's the right line for me? So those, that would be the thing. I don't think there's any other specific things that I could think of that would be really key. I mean, I guess if you've got concerns around excursions, the advantages with different excursions, there are a wide range of options. I was going to say, if you're going on a river cruise, they have slow walkers, fast walkers, active, not active. So that's the thing I would really focus on, and I would write those down and talk to a travel agent. That would be my. Good to hear that chocolate. Literally, that if I'm looking at a dessert menu and they have what's it called, those chocolate melting puddings or something like that, that's the only time I'll have a dessert. Literally, so Peloton and Pelican. I'm sure that could probably keep you. Here's a good one. Oh, that's a good suggestion, Heather. That's a really good suggestion. Tony and Jenny, La Lida Loca. That's a really great idea. So Tony, La Lida Loca, is, he has a really big channel. He posts multiple times a week. He mostly focuses at the moment on kind of news and updates at the moment, but that's not what he, in normal times, he obviously does more cruising tips, etc. As well. But, and his channel's going really, really fast. But that's a great suggestion, because he's spoken about some of those issues. I mean, he did one recently where he was talking about travel advice. So, for example, in the US, there was advice against, I think the CDC had advice against plus size people with certain health conditions not traveling and not cruising. And he had a whole video talking about that and what he was going to do. So that's a really great suggestion. So definitely La Liga Loca, that's a really good suggestion. So let's have a quick look. I think that's a great advice from Tina, saying just go and enjoy yourself. That's the key. Absolutely. It's just being on the right line. If you get on the right cruise line, you'll absolutely do that. Tina's asking a question. Have you sailed several times since as you've sailed, several times since Viking Venus. Do you still think it was one of the better cruises for service and food? Yes, absolutely. I did actually. If I look, I've been on 6 cruises so far, and I'm going on a Sky Princess in about on the 17th. How many days that's away? 2 weeks away. Just under 2 weeks away. Excuse me. And if I was going to rank them in terms of those, I do put Viking Venus as the first one, partly because it was a new line, a new experience I hadn't been on before, so there was lots of novelty. But in terms of the service, attention to detail, and the food, I thought was really, really excellent. So then a slug of water. I would then put Silhouette second. Again, also I was traveling the retreat experience, which is really good. Service was top notch, particularly for a bigger sized ship. Food I thought was really good. I think they really upped the game on food. I think third I would probably put Regal Princess. Fourth I would put Virgin, and fifth I would put P&O. And I would say Virgin food was outstanding. It was really, really good. And if I was ranking food, if I was honest, I would actually probably nudge Virgin a little bit above Princess for food, which was probably quite controversial, but Virgin food was outstanding. So, but definitely Viking Venus is up there. And we actually wrestled with going on Viking rather than Seabourn for that trip. Good to hear. Going cruising next year. I like it when I have converts. William, I'll answer that question because we're running out of time. What was your favorite restaurant on Scarlet Lady? My favorite restaurant was the Wake. I really, really liked the Wake. I thought it was, for me, felt the most upmarket. I liked that whole the steaks and seafood. I thought was really, really good. But I also really liked Pink Agave, the Mexican. I thought that was really, really outstanding as well. And the Italian. Those are my 3 sort of favorites. Wow. So we've kind of just, am I on a keto diet? No, I'm not on a keto diet. I think keto diet, if I remember correctly, is a little bit like, it's a little like Atkins, the olden days Atkins. No, I'm not on any sort of diet at all. I don't eat. So I think that's a no carbs. I don't know. I like carbs. That's a no carbs. I could never do years ago in Atkins, I think I tried that. So no, I'm not on a keto diet, and I haven't tried a keto diet. So yeah. So that's fine asking personal questions. Wow. So we've now just jogged through so much time, and time has gone so quickly. But thanks so much for joining me. There will be a live stream next week. The week after that, there probably won't be one because I'll be on Sky Princess. Thanks so much for joining. Thanks again for these fantastic questions. Someone just saying they offer a kosher one. Saw that. I quickly throw that one in. So thanks so much for joining me. Have a great rest of the weekend. Have a great time if you're going cruising. And hopefully I will see you next week. If not, I have videos to watch and lots of videos and stuff. So thanks so much. I really appreciate everybody joining me. I really appreciate that people give up their time, so many of you, to watch this. And hopefully it's been some help. So have a great time.